Good morning and welcome to this special edition of Treaty Talk, where we look forward to this weekend's All-Ireland semi-finals involving Limerick and Waterford on Saturday and Cork and Kilkenny on Sunday. Many of you will probably be expecting Ciaran Carey. He just got caught up. He'll be joining us at some stage. So stay tuned for a full review of this weekend's semi-finals in Croke Park.
The impression of the game you get out with what you put into it's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Ciaran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Matt, it's All-Ireland final or All-Ireland semi-final weekend, and I suppose for many years, for the Limerick faithful, it was one where you'd watch on from the outset. But 4 years in a row now, All-Ireland semi-finals, it's none to be laughed at, really, is it?
It certainly isn't, Jack. And I suppose, we have been bystanders for long enough. And All-Ireland semi-final weekend, which it is now, there's been separate weekends for many years, but it seems to be a weekend affair now. It's the place you want to be. And coming up against Waterford, it's of course a rematch of last year's All-Ireland final, but it's also a new rivalry that has evolved in the last number of years. If you go back to 2013 and 2014, they had a great rivalry at minor level when they met in successive Munster finals, and I think both of them went to replays and Limerick won both of them. And now that has translated into a senior rivalry. But it's a senior rivalry where Limerick have very definitely held the upper hand in the last number of years. Like if you go back to the championships of 2017, a huge win in the Gaelic grounds in the round robin. 2018, then you had a big win again down in Walsh Park, or was it 2019? I'm getting mixed up between these years. You also had in 2020 or in 2019, you had the league final in Croke Park, a big win for Limerick. Last year, the Munster final, not such a big win, but a comfortable win. And then you had the comfortable win in the All-Ireland final. But I honestly believe ahead of Sunday, we must avoid getting carried away, because I think this Waterford team has certainly improved on last year. Now, starting out at the start of the year, whilst John Kiley had a full hand to play from, to pick from, it wasn't the case with Liam Cahill, as he knew coming into the year, of course, that he had already lost Taig de Burka because of that unfortunate injury in the All-Ireland final. And I suppose when hopes of a return of Padraig O'Mahony dissipated again, that was a blow. And certainly what was a huge blow, of course, was the departure for taking a year out of goalkeeper Stephen O'Keefe, and a former All-Star who has served his county so well for so long. But he has got over that. Now, like if you talk about the goalkeeper situation, I think he has juggled around with the goalkeeper situation a bit, in that Billy Nolan seemed to be the automatic first choice during the course of the league and for the first game in the championship. And he has since been displaced very effectively, Marco, by Sean O'Brien, who was sitting on the bench as the third goalkeeper last year. So, like that is the O'Keefe conundrum resolved. Now, the centre half conundrum Iarlath Daly was the man that stepped in the All Ireland final, and did quite well. But he missed the most recent victory, and over Tipperary, and Shane Bennett stepped into the breach. Now it was a huge boost. I was talking about the downsides of the Waterford team. It was a huge boost that Shane Bennett returned to the panel. That was a major boost. That was like signing a Jack Grealish nearly at this stage. But he bedded in nicely at centre half back last week. Now Patrick Curran, who is a forward that I have personally a very good time for. He seems to be nailing down a place now, and it was one of the things I couldn't understand, particularly last year, that he didn't, because I think coming through the ranks as both minor, under 21, and at senior level, he has never let the side down. So, look, it's a completely new year. It's a completely new game. What has happened in 2020 is totally irrelevant to what will happen between the White Lions in Croke Park at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening.
Yeah, it definitely is a new year, and I went through a lot of the Waterford team there, and I'm eager to go through both teams just later on in this. But just for now, with Limerick coming in as huge favourites, I suppose last year against Galway in the semi-final, they were also favoured and they got through that. But I just harken back to 2019 and the semi-final against Kilkenny, where they came in as Munster champions, they had that long break, and I suppose they got caught with a bit of an ambush from Kilkenny. Is there a danger of that happening again this weekend?
Well, you know, Sean Finn was at pains in his interview during the week to say like how happy he was that 4-week gap that was between the Munster final and the All Ireland semi final had been somewhat bridged to 3 weeks. On the face of it, you would say yes, but if you delve into it, you would say no, for the simple reason that when you looked at the round robin, Jack, when we had the round robin series, the third game for a third week in a row always seemed to present a barrier to all teams. And we have Waterford now in a situation going into Saturday's game for a fourth weekend in a row. So, and the type of game that Waterford play, this running game, high intensity running, it's bound to somewhat take its toll, whilst Limerick will be coming into the game fresh. And I think the answer to your original question is no, that it doesn't. It doesn't favour the team that has been active. Maybe with that extra 4 weeks, that extra week, it may. But Sean Finn, as I said, was at pains to point out like that you know how that it was beneficial that it was reduced to 3 weeks, and he elaborated why. You know, you had a full week for recovery, and you had a week of hard training, and then you had a week of training and into match routine. So it would look in a normal situation to be an ideal situation to have a 3-week break.
Yeah, and just looking through some of the comments, and make sure to get your comments in, get your thoughts in on who you think is going to win the weekend, where you think it's going to be won and lost, even on the team. So we'll just go through a few of those. Ollie O'Regan Jr. says Limerick, of course. When I asked who they think would win, Doris Shire was the same, Limerick for sure. Mahuna Mac, John is going to the game this weekend. He hopes Limerick give it to Waterford on Limerick. Trina Hamilton says she thinks Limerick will be too strong, despite Waterford's hunger, and they'll definitely be hungry in Waterford at such a long delay for an All-Ireland. Kay Ryan, simple with Limerick and a green love heart. So just on the teams, we haven't got the Waterford team, but we have got the Limerick team, and I suppose there's no real surprises with the changes. We got Dan Morrissey is back in and Aaron Gillan. It just gives that bit of freshness, and I suppose it just shows the competition for places in the Limerick team, that even though you're bringing on all-stars in Dan Morrissey and Aaron Gillan, you've all-stars on the bench in Rich English and Graham Mulcahy.
Yeah, they're coming in instead of all-stars. You know, that's a very, very, very strong position to be in. But the big question, of course, about Limerick is We have no doubt at all about the level that they can reach. But we even though I've had protestations to the contrary, that they were not themselves or they were not poor in the first half against Tipperary, I thought in relative terms they were poor, and it was coupled with the fact that Tipperary were absolutely excellent in that first half in the Munster final. But by God, were Limerick to turn out in Croke Park on Saturday and give 70 minutes of what they get in the second half, it just was simply awesome. And the big men really stood up, and at the risk of being boring at this stage about Cian Lynch, he took the game absolutely by the scruff of the neck, absolutely. But you mentioned Dan Morrissey and you mentioned Aaron Gillan there, Jack. They came on huge impact. That is evidence of the strength of the Limerick squad. They made instant impacts. Now it was unfortunate, whatever injury that Richie English picked up, but certainly the two that are mentioned, they made a huge impact. And like you think about Kyle Hayes. And he gets a goal against Cork in the Munster final and our Munster semi-final, and you'll say that he won't be allowed to do that again. But it was a carbon copy almost. And is it that he got away with it the second time? No, it isn't. It's absolutely sheer power matched with skill, absolute skill. The way he finished it was absolutely clinical. You see, you all those factors, and of course, another unseen factor was I thought we saw an absolutely outstanding display on the day by Barry Nash at cornerback. Arguably his best game at senior level, but we've spoken a number of times, and I absolutely admire to no end Barry Nash's versatility. We saw him as a very, very prolific and dangerous underage forward at minor and under 21 level. John Kiley switched him back to the half-back line 2 years ago. Eyebrows were raised all over the place. No, was he losing the run of himself? And what did we see? We saw 3 or 4 man-of-the-match performances from Barry Nash. And when the call came last year, when John Kiley was faced with replacing 2 of his full backline, Mike Casey and Richie English, because of injury, Barry Nash dovetails neatly in at cornerback. He's made the position his own. Absolutely, he has been faultless in the 2 games, and he gets very, very little mention. Very, very little mention. But I honestly thought that his performance in the Munster final, right through now, first and second half, was absolutely one for the ages.
Oh yeah, Barry has certainly stepped into that role with minimal of fuss. And I suppose getting into the tactics of it, Waterford like to drop out deep, and we'll say the full forward line, their team hasn't been named, as you mentioned, will most likely be Desi Hutchinson, Austin Gleeson, and Patrick Curran, as you mentioned. And usually it's Desi on his own inside, and you'd imagine Sean Finn is going to be hand-picked to mark Desi Hutchinson. So that could nearly play into Barry Nash's game, that he's going to be further out the field, closer to the goal. And we saw him in the league that he can definitely score from cornerback.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think your assessment is probably right, and it worked. It worked against them. It certainly worked the last day against Tipperary. But I think from a tactical point of view and parts of their game that Waterford let a few cats out of the bag against Tipperary. They had to dig out the game, and if you let cats out of the bag, by God, John Kiley will gobble them up, and Paul Kinnerk, and I agree with you that's what they probably will do. Patrick Curran tends to rove out around the 40 in around centre forward position, move around. And Austin Gleeson, of course, he's unlikely to patch himself inside in the edge of the square. So look, they have a potent full forward line. There's no question at all about that. But it is how they play on the day and what kind of a supply they'll get on the day. And I think that Limerick's tactic will be to ensure that the supply that they get is as minimum as possible.
Yeah, I think the work has to be done out the field, and we get into that. But there's just a few more comments. Frank Joe on Twitter says Barry Nash is the unsung hero of this brilliant Limerick team. Did some work in the Munster final, and you touched on that. And then the Shelminator on YouTube, kind of with a little bit of a rhyme for the fullback line. Nash all over like a rash, Finn harder than sin, Morrissey buzzed like a bee. And I suppose it's just a brilliant fullback line. And when we won the All Ireland in 2018, we were saying Finn, Rich English, and Mike Casey, you couldn't get a better fullback line. And here we have a completely different reincarnation of the fullback line. You've obviously Mike Casey has just come back from injury. Rich English picked up that injury. It's just a testament to Limerick that the players are coming through. But in the line in front of them three, it's probably Limerick's standout line with the half-hour line. But Burns, Hannon, and Hayes, and they'll be up against Jack Fagan, Stephen Bennett, and Jack Prendergast. And I just think the matchup with Jack Fagan, whichever man he goes on to, either Hayes or Burns, the aerial battle there will be worth the entrance fee alone.
It will. But I would have, and I know Jack Fagan is very, very good in the air, and I'm just trying to think quickly. What game did he snatch the ball inside in a forest of players and flick it into the net? It was this year anyway.
It was against Limerick. It was against Limerick in Walsh Park. He came up over.
It was. So Limerick, I'm sure will have contingencies in place for Jack Fagan's aerial prowess. But if he comes up against either of the two that you mentioned, I'd be quite confident that on 1-to-1s, I'd be very, very confident of Dermot Burns and Kyle Hayes counteracting Jack Fagan. Now, his aerial prowess is a bit of a problem. There's no question about that. But I think Limerick will be very, 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 very mindful of it, and will take action to ensure that he doesn't impact in the game in that regard.
But is the best form of defence, just say he goes in and Kyle Hayes, is the best form of defence for Limerick to go all out attack and tell Kyle, get up that line and make sure he follows you and see what Jack Fagan and Stephen Bennett are like on the back foot?
Yeah, but that's what it's likely to be anyway, isn't it? And like Limerick have done that so often, and counties have failed to counteract it. And we mentioned it a while ago about the Kyle Hayes goal and his second goal in as many matches. It's absolutely sheer power. He's a super athlete, and a super hurler to go with it. And like you have Burns then raiding on the other side and picking off the odd long range point, and he's very, very good from long range placed balls. If you were to create two ideal wing backs, we've got him.
Yeah, if you took him out of a lab, it'll be Dermot Burns and Kyle Hayes. We're blessed to have him. And then in the middle, you obviously have Declan Hannon, and Declan Hannon is Limerick's quarterback. I don't know if there's a better pure striker in the game, but the only thing is it could be where Limerick is susceptible is if Hannon is sitting, which he will invariably do, and it's for the better of the team. Jack Prendergast is a bit of a live wire at centre forward. Could there be trouble for Limerick if he drops deep like Jason Ford did, like Tony Kelly did last year, and can get the ball way out the field on his own pretty much?
Yeah, there could be trouble. But when you talk about those three players, and this is no disrespect to Jack Prendergast, and he's a very, very good player, but he doesn't have the same finishing prowess as either Jason Ford or Tony Kelly, and therefore is not in as big a position or is in as well placed to punish you when he drops deep and gets in possession. But I've the utmost faith that on Declan Hannon. Declan Hannon is another one that you get from a lab as well, and he's I've been saying this about Declan Hannon for a long, long time. Declan Hannon makes hurling, in my opinion, look a beautiful game. He makes it look simple. He makes the difficult things look simple. His anticipation, his hurling, his distribution. That was one. Was it in the Munster final that he released? I'm just trying to think and getting confused between all the games. But he just got the minimum space, looked up, picked out a player, and was over the bar. I think it was Keane Lynch he picked out.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any worries, and I hear this thing going around like, will such and such a one give Declan Hannon trouble? Who really has given Declan Hannon trouble?
Yeah, I suppose it's more his is a more of a team role, and Hannon protects that full back line, and I suppose he has that trust as well that if his man picks it up and it goes over his head, that he has Finn Morrissey and Barry Nash in behind, that look, if it goes to that scenario. And then we haven't even mentioned Nicky Quaid, that if worse comes to worse, we have the best goalie in Ireland as well. And every time we go on, we mention Nicky Quaid, but he deserves to be mentioned.
He does, certainly, but before we finish on Declan Hannon, like if it goes over his head and into the full back line, he's back there helping his full back line straight away and is available to take the pass and clear,
Yeah.
And his power of recovery is absolutely fantastic. But sure, look, Nicky is Nicky. Like, what can you say that hasn't been said about Nicky, or what can you say to do justice to the contribution that Nicky Quaid has made? Like, you'd need a couple of treaty talks, I think, Jack. His contribution, not just alone to Limerick, but his contribution to his club Effin and his contribution to the GAA is absolutely phenomenal. I think people don't realise. I'd be telling people about the contribution that Nicky Quaid makes off the field as well, with training youngsters and improving the facilities in his own club, hands-on and a leader and all that, and to go with it, a fantastic all-star goalkeeper.
Yeah, and we've threatened to do a special on Nicky Quaid and I suppose the Quaid family, and I think it could be a Christmas special this year, because last year we obviously had the championship at Christmas. But I suppose talking about Nicky Quaid and then his absent number, Sean O'Brien, and you mentioned Sean O'Brien, it's probably where the biggest discrepancy lies in the teams. And no disrespect to Sean O'Brien, but it's just experience. You need experience in the goals. And I've played in goals a few times this year, and it's one position you kind of need to know what you're doing inside there, because if anything goes wrong in there, you're to blame. And it's probably the biggest discrepancy, I think, of the teams. But I think Maurice Brown, he texted in there on Facebook with a great point, and he just says, I think Limerick will win. They play as one unit, they stick to the plan and don't panic. And I suppose, and I'm going to touch it another point, Limerick play as a one. And if you stop, we'll say, Tom Morrissey, you're going to have to stop Gerard Hegarty, Aaron Gillan, Shane Flanagan. There's so many players you have to stop. Whereas Waterford are probably that little bit more reliant on one individual. And if I was to pick one of them, it would probably be Jamie Byrne. And he's made a huge difference, Jamie, since he came back. He obviously missed the Clare game. He only came on against Laois. But against Galway and against Tip, the performances from Jamie Byrne are incredible. And he's probably, on his day, the premier midfielder in the country. But when he's been matched up at William O'Donoghue, it's generally gone the way of an Piercing man. So how important is that midfield battle for Limerick?
It has, and the last two big games, there's any doubt about it. The Munster final of last year and the All-Ireland final of last year, it certainly has fell Limerick's way. That Jamie Byrne wasn't allowed to impose himself on like he had done in previous games, or that he has done indeed, for that matter, since he came back this year. And I think it's hugely important. He's the heartbeat. He's the pulse of that Waterford team. He does for Waterford what Dara Fitzgibbon does for Cork, and I know we'll be talking about Cork and Kilkenny in a moment, but he absolutely hugely important. But he seems to find great difficulty when he comes up against William O'Donoghue, and from a Limerick point of view, it's very, very important that run continues at the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And just a few comments here. We have a Martin O'Shea, who he's plucking for Waterford. And I suppose we've a comment here from Jim Daly. Do you realise there's two teams in the field? And I think we're doing a fair job going through both the teams. But obviously, two Limerick men, you're going to be that bit biased. I certainly don't think Limerick have this game won. And I think of the three teams Limerick could have faced, I think Waterford are the most dangerous. And just a point here from Sean O'Tierney, the game he won in the middle third, and the power. I think Waterford have the power to upset Limerick, that they can probably take on Limerick in a way that no other team can. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Waterford. I've been saying that all right, but to a certain degree. But in answer to Jim Daly there, and we're talking all about Limerick, we haven't come to Waterford at all yet. So like he's sort of preempting what we might be saying. If he holds on in there, we'll be talking about Waterford in a minute, I'm sure. Yeah, but it's your question, Jack, was about the middle third. Well, you know who we have in the middle third when it comes to it. We have a certain Ciaran Lynch, you know, who seems to take control of that area of the field. But having said that, Waterford are quite equipped. Waterford are quite equipped to tackle us on there, to take us on there. How successful they will be, that is the question. And you know, therein lies their chances of success. But anyone that thinks that we're writing off Limerick or writing off Waterford, we certainly aren't writing off Waterford. And I think we, at the very outset, we acknowledged here in this cast that Waterford, it would be a totally different Waterford team that we will be facing on Saturday than that we faced in last year's All-Ireland final. And we're trying to dig below the surface and find out why that is so. And, you know, there are a lot of valid reasons as to why it will be so. Like Waterford, Waterford will have learned. They will have... Liam Cahill will have a year extra with his squad, and down, you know, the real reason, Jack, is that why it would be different is that Waterford have a damn lot of good hurlers, and very, very good hurlers. And the big question that we're trying to pass and analyse is whether they have enough good hurlers to overcome Limerick or not. I think they're going to give Limerick quite a test on Saturday.
Yeah, you talk about the difference there between 2020 and this year, and probably a big change for Waterford has been in that half-back line, and it's inflicted on Waterford. Obviously, the injury to Tadhg Burka in last year's All-Ireland final, I don't think Waterford win the All-Ireland if Tadhg Burka is there, but Tadhg Burka, like, if Declan Hannon is Limerick's quarterback, Tadhg Burka is the same and more for Waterford. Just an exceptional talent. His reading of the game is second to none, but obviously Tadhg isn't there this year, and we wish him the best luck in his recovery. Hopefully he'll be able to play with his club in the Waterford Championship. Probably for Limerick point of view, you're probably happy not to see Tadhg there because he's that good. But Shane Bennett has gone in at centre back. He is a forward. We've seen with Barry Nash that forwards can play in the backs, that they can do that. He's a completely different player to Tadhg Burka, and he'll probably be tasked with marking Ciaran Lynch. And he mightn't be a defender in his play, but Shane Bennett will definitely have the speed just to keep going with Ciaran Lynch, and he'll probably put into Keane's mind that he can go forward as well. It's a different one for Ciaran Lynch, and probably one that hasn't been tried before. And if it works for Waterford, you are going a long way to neutralising Limerick.
You are absolutely, and we totally acknowledge that. If some county finds a formula someday to neutralise Ciaran Lynch, it certainly will go a long way towards will certainly put Limerick under an awful lot of pressure. But I'm not so sure that Shane Bennett might start at centre back. It might be Iarlaith Daly that might go in there. But Waterford have a real find in the last 2 years, and he's a player that you know hit the scene last year and is absolutely growing in stature this year, and that is wing-back Callum Lyons, who absolutely loves to go forward. And I think it was in his first championship game last year against Cork, where he ghosted up the right wing and buried the ball in the Cork net past Anthony Nash, which isn't an easy thing to do. So, like he's a real good player now. Ciaran Bennett is the other lad on the other wing. I think he was in the forwards last year, and I think he's settling down. And again, as you mentioned, and as we mentioned about Barry Nash, there is another player that has been switched from attack to defence, and relatively successfully. So if you take the Tipperary game into account, so look. Yeah, Waterford will be strong at half back, but Limerick, of course, are very, very, very strong at half forward. Like when you have the hurler of the year of 2020, hurler of the year of 2018, plus Tom Morrissey. This is very interesting about Tom Morrissey and about the and the Munster final. Tom was taken off in the game against Cork. The game didn't run for him. But like when you do the stats of the Munster final, Tom ended up with 6 points, 5 of which were from play. And I think we predicted that kind of a response from Tom. But on the day, it didn't seem to be happening. But Tom's points all came at crucial stages. He was keeping Limerick. A couple of them came at a vital stage in the first half, just keep the scoreboard ticking over when things weren't going that well. And then towards the end, he got a couple when they were closing out the game. It was the type of response that we were expecting from Tom, and that's going to be a huge battle. Whatever three Waterford will come up with in the half back line against Hegarty, Lynch, and Morrissey, that is probably maybe the defining area of the field in the game.
Yeah, you are probably right. It probably is the defining area, and it'll be up to Liam Cahill to decide. And he could go a number of ways, as you mentioned. Earl Daly, he missed the last 2 games with injury. He actually came on for Tydeburg in last All-Ireland final, so he's probably the one, as you mentioned, that will go in centre back if you want to free up Shane Bennett to go further up the field. You mentioned Ciaran Bennett, a brilliant player. I think he scored 3 from play the last day. He's kind of like the Burns for Waterford, and then Callum Lyons is as close to Kyle Hayes as you're going to get. Only left-handed is probably the only difference in the two of them. They're exceptional to watch. They are changing the way halfbacks are playing, and it does put into the mind of Tom Morrissey and Grod Hegarty that they're not going to have it their way like they've become accustomed to it, that they will be on the back foot for a share of the game. Just a few more comments we'll go in here. Ciaran Carey is another one that's going for Waterford. He's family in Limerick, but his head is saying that it's going to be Waterford. Sarah Sullivan is a club mate of ours. She's from Muskegon. Hi, Sarah, how are you? She's saying, come on, Limerick. That's generally the feeling we're getting from the Limerick folk. Jim Daly is sending out a warning that Pat Horgan missed 1-8 against Limerick and we won by 8. Kenneth Sullivan has replied saying we had 20 wides on the same day. So there's a lot to be said. But getting into the full forward line where games are so often won and lost, you have Aaron Glenn, you have Seamus Flanagan, and you have Peter Casey. But on the Waterford side, you're going to have definitely Conor Prunty at fullback. You're more likely going to have Ian Kenny in the corner, and then you have the choice between Conor Gleeson and Shane McNulty. Now, Conor Gleeson was missing the Tipperary game through suspension, but do you fancy Gleeson come back in? He started the first 3 games.
Yeah, I would fancy Conor Gleeson to come back in. So you're probably looking at Gleeson. You're probably looking at Gleeson, Conor Prunty, and Kenny as the probably likely full back line. Certainly Conor Gleeson coming back is a boost, certainly for Waterford. Now he again is a player that has been tried in various areas of the field, and again seems to have adapted quite well to cornerback. It give you a sense of Liam Cahill's thinking and about the versatility of the players that he wants at his disposal. Now, Conor Prunty is a fine fullback. That has been proved in last year in particular, and notwithstanding the goal, particularly that Callan got, that can happen to anybody. It doesn't make him any lesser of a fullback. But I'm really looking forward to the battle between Conor Prunty and Seamus Flanagan. That could be a battle for the ages, and it'll be interesting to see. I presume Ian Kenny, who started at right back in the All Ireland, will probably move over to left back. I'm not sure. The matchups with Peter Casey and Gillan will be terribly important. They'll be terribly important from a Waterford point of view as well, that they're successful, and they'll probably be equally as important from a Limerick point of view if they're to go on and win the game.
Yeah, there's so many fascinating matchups, and I just wanted to go on Conor Prunty. I think against Tipperary, he may have been caught out for that first goal that goes over his head. It's probably Seamus Callanan's experience more than anything, but I thought Prunty was powerful in the quarter final against Tip. And against Seamus Flanagan, he'll have his hands full, but like that's a fascinating battle. He could even go on to Galan, but there was a comment made there, and look, anything happened, the heat of battle. But against Waterford in Walsh Park earlier this year, Limerick had 2 red cards. Now the one to Kyle at the very end, I think, was extremely soft, and I think they were just picking out a man inside in a scuffle. But Aaron Galan against Tipperary was probably lucky to get away, and I'm just going to find the name, so it won't be blamed for me. But Michael Heelan says that Galan and Flanagan have a sharp fuse, that's where Waterford could go after him. Now, I'm not saying that, but if Waterford can get on top in that full forward line, if they can get ahead of Galan and Flanagan, it will all probably come down to Peter Casey. And he has been flying this year, and he is capable of taking on a team on his own. But if you can stop 2 out of 3 in Limerick's full forward line, then you're going a long way to stopping the Limerick juggernaut.
You're going a considerable way now. It's hard. Peter Casey is the least predictable of the 3 because he tends to move around so much, and he's so economical with his striking, and you know that he's very difficult to counteract, and like he's a massive work rate as well for a corner forward. So it's you're right. If Waterford can negate 2 of the Limerick full forward line, it will go somewhere towards stopping the Limerick juggernaut, as you call it.
Yeah, and I suppose that's going through the teams. Then when you just go on to the managers, because the managers have so much to play, or they have so much like impetus on this team. And John Kiley, we spoke at length about John Kiley, and I suppose we've done enough talking really about John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk to that extent. But for Liam Cahill to do what he's done in the last 2 years at Waterford, it was a Waterford team that hadn't won a game in 2 years. They'd probably got a fair share of clippings as well in that time. To come back, they've now beaten Tip, they've beaten Kilkenny, they've beaten Cork, they've beaten Waterford, they've beaten Clare. They've beaten everyone but Limerick. Can you see Liam trying something completely different this year? He played against them twice last year, lost both of them, will have learned lessons. How would you see them going about it this weekend?
He will have learned lessons, and that's the point we're making right from the start, that it'll be a totally different Waterford animal. But talking of Liam Cahill, there are a lot of parallels between Liam Cahill and John Kiley. Like John Kiley led Limerick to an All-Ireland under-21 success in 2015, and then made the transition by 2018 to senior. Liam Cahill has gone down a similar path, albeit he won under 21s or under 20s, under 21, under 20 back to back with his native Tipperary, and has now gone on to Waterford, and he's doing an absolute superb job with Waterford, because he came into a Waterford side that you know were really drifting. It would be unfair to say going nowhere, but drifting along. No, he made 2 huge decisions when he came in first, and that was the exclusion of Waterford heroes and household names, Noel Connors and Maurice Shanahan from the panel. But he made a statement of what he was all about, and he has driven on from that. And his credentials as a coach, his credentials as a manager, and you know, they are beyond question at this stage with what he has achieved with this Waterford team, to get him to an All-Ireland final last year. And you know, he certainly will have a plan. And you know what that plan is going to be to beat Limerick. Is he going to come up with something that we haven't seen before? I think Limerick have seen most of it, if not all of it, before. And John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk are such meticulous in their preparation that they will have covered every eventuality. But quite honestly, I don't know what he's going to come up with. But he will come up with more of his running game, which has been so successful for him in the competition this year, and indeed last year. And like, I think this game will be. This game, Jack, before there'll be a winner decided, will go down the home straight.
Yeah, it promised to be a fascinating game, and we spoke great at length of this game, and you could talk for days about it. But I suppose we'll get into prediction side of it, Matt, and maybe I've a fair feeling where we're going to go with this. But where will the game be won and lost? We've gone through each line, gone through the managers, gone through the fact that Limerick have the break, Waterford had 4 weeks, but Waterford have that hunger, and it's hard to beat hunger. And I know Limerick have won 2 All-Irelands, but they'll still have that bit of hunger to win and create legacy was so long. But can Waterford's hunger counteract Limerick's, I suppose, obvious greatness?
I don't think it will on this occasion. I'm going with Limerick naturally, because Limerick know that they have a special team, and I think there is a collective determination within the group from John Kiley down to number 36, that there are opportunities in front of them, and they're doing their utmost to make the most of it. Because after last year's All-Ireland final, you would say that they had achieved what they had to achieve. They banished the idea of there being a one-year wonder. They banished the idea like that the round robin system in Munster suited them, because they won it in a practically totally different format. All those were put to bed, but there was one thing that was not put to bed, as far as I could determine from speaking to a couple of the lads and speaking and the management, is the hunger for more. And there's hunger in Waterford, but there is hunger in Limerick, and there's hunger in Limerick, and most of the lads don't remember it probably, to atone for 45 years of misery, but they will have heard enough about it. And Tom Morrissey, last year, when he gave an interview prior to the All-Ireland final, and when he was asked the question about the comparison with the 1930s, he deflected it very, very quickly to say like that they were making their own history. And that is the way it is. I think Limerick will not lack motivation one iota. The fact that they've won 2 All-Irelands and 3 leagues, this group, and some of them 2 All-Ireland under 21 medals. It is the one thing that came through to me after last year's All-Ireland final, and since last year's All-Ireland final, that for the most part, this squad are one bit happy with what they have achieved to date. They want more. And I think that will be a determining factor.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a desire to create a legacy, even if they're not putting the word legacy, which they're quick to put away, but they are definitely going that way. And Neil Tracy is a proud Limerick man, on Off the Ball actually tweeted after the Munster final. He was like, he wanted someone to make a picture of John Kiley or Brian Cody handing a baton to John Kiley, and Limerick are certainly going that way, but they have a huge task ahead of them. And I think the game will probably be won in the final 10-15 minutes, because 4 weeks on the row is very tough. And look, it's unfortunate for Waterford, and it's unfortunate for a spectator if it plays out like that, if Waterford's legs go, because there's nothing they can do about that. But I don't think this game is going to be won till the end. Waterford need to hit the ground running, and they probably will, because they have played games, and I think it'll come down to the end. But I think we'll have Limerick in back-to-back All-Ireland finals for the first time in a long, long time. But just before we move on from the game, there's a good few comments here they want to go through. Ciaran Carey, Waterford man, he just said it was a brilliant podcast, and we love to hear like that. He is saying that we're correct with Limerick's half-forward line is a serious threat, but he's leaving a comment there about their legend, Ozzie Gleeson. He's back in his happy place, roaming all over the place, and the Limerick backs better be ready for an Austin Gleeson onslaught. And if anyone is to take Limerick on, it'll be Ozzie. He scored 5 points from play in the All-Ireland final last year. He's hit 113 the championship this year, a couple of sidelines in with that. He does seem to be in his happy place, and when Austin Gleeson gets going, there's few like him. Jim Daly is saying that 4 games in the trot is going to make a difference. The Waterford had the fire in the bellies, but it might not be enough against this Limerick side. Jamie McCormick is saying Limerick have the Ireland in the bag. We won't be saying that just yet. There's a few more from the Shelminator. Brilliant little, I suppose, rhymes again. Hayes leaves opponents in a daze. Burns places rivals in urns. And Hannon always right on. They have one about Nicky Quaid. His equal is yet to be made. And I suppose to finish off with the Limerick game, Billy Smith says it best. Let's hope it's a great game and Limerick to come out on top. I suppose we will be that bit biased, hoping for Limerick. But moving on from the Limerick game, and there's obviously another game the weekend on Sunday. Cork and Kilkenny will play the winners of Limerick and Waterford in the All-Ireland final. The bookies can't separate it, Matt, and I'm like that. I'm struggling to separate the teams. They're probably two completely different teams going against each other, whereas Limerick and Waterford are similar. Cork and Kilkenny completely contrasting. How do you see the game going?
Yeah, and if the bookies and you can separate them, Jack, and you expect me to, is it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I was doing a preview for our paper during the week on it, and I was delving into obviously both sides, and I delved particularly into the Kilkenny side because I was pretty familiar with Cork being in Munster, and Limerick having played them in the league, and Limerick having played them in the championship, and I was pretty familiar with all the players and what they were all about. But looking at Kilkenny, and this is no disrespect to Kilkenny or no disrespect to anybody. There's 2 points I would make. Now they finished top of their group in the league, and it was by far the easier group of the two. And I would raise questions about the standard. Now people have done this and have been proved wrong in the past, and if I'm proved wrong, so be it. But it would appear to me that the standard of hurling in Munster is higher than it is in Leinster at present. Now, we saw what happened to Wexford, the way they got knocked out, and we saw in particular what happened to Galway. Yeah, you know, the way Galway got beaten in the first of all got beaten in the Leinster final, and then got beaten in the qualifiers by Waterford. Now, the defeat of Galway in the qualifiers by Waterford comes with the caveat like that I suppose Waterford and it's the biggest hoodoo in hurling. Waterford and Galway clashes. They've played 12 times. Waterford have won 11. And the only one that didn't win was, of course, the one that really mattered most, I suppose, was the 2017 All-Ireland final. But I'm saying that in the context of we see how the Leinster teams have fared. I'm just trying to back up my point that I don't think that the standard in Leinster was as good as Munster this year. But Kilkenny are Kilkenny. And Brian Cody is Brian Cody, and he's in his 22nd or 23rd year as Kilkenny manager. You know, he's won 2 leagues. He's won 2 Leinster championships in the last couple of years, nice and quietly. He got hit by a tsunami in last year's All-Ireland semi-final. He certainly won't be lacking motivation, but the big question is, have Kilkenny got the players to do it? Now, Cork, there is no doubt that Cork have taken to the qualifiers.
We've lost
I have to say in the championship, you know, I think that they have certainly improved since the game against Limerick. Now, whether they have improved enough to beat a team like Kilkenny or not is another question. Cork are in semi-transition, and now I understand that Niall O'Leary is a doubt for Sunday, and but they're in the happy position that for the game against Dublin the last day, that Colm Spillane made his long-awaited return, and who's a huge player for Cork. So, and you have Robert Downey settling in as a fullback, and has had 2 excellent outings now for Cork against Clare and against Dublin. But he may be facing TJ Reid on Sunday. So that will be a challenge of a new level. And it'd be definitely a very, very good hurler. On the face of the last 2 games, would seem to be about to make the fullback position his own. Like Sean O'Donoghue, very, very, very tight, very, very tight defender. good half-back line. Where we speculated at the beginning of the year about Tim O'Mahony. Tim O'Mahony would be the first name I would have on the Cork team every week, and but we were at a loss to know where. And I have to say I felt half-back was his position, and I think he's making that his own with Mark Coleman. John Millerick has been a revelation since he came into the side. You have Dara Fitzgibbon. We have spoken about him. We know what he brings, and Luke Meade. Now it's up then to the Cork forwards. Like Seamus Hannity looks to be recovering some of his best form. We've Shane Kingston, with Patrick Horgan, and of course, the sensation of the season for me has been Jack O'Connor.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic at corner forward. Absolutely fantastic, given everybody the run around and given everybody plenty to think about. So Cork are certainly on an upward trajectory, but Kilkenny, they are old hands. If you discount the tsunami that they were hit by Waterford last year in the second half, they're at old hands at sticking in there and getting and striking when the iron is hot and getting through semi-finals. We know it, Jack, to our cost, and we don't. And you even, Jack, are around long enough to remember 2014 and 2019.
Yeah.
Oh, and that was days in which Kilkenny dug out results. So I think it's going to be very, very close. You would imagine in the open spaces of Croke Park that the advantage might go to Cork with the type of game they play. But again, as I said, Kilkenny have a very strong. They have a strong defence. They seem to have a strong defence. Like Owen Murphy is as good a goalkeeper, second only to Nicky Quaid. But then again, Patrick Collins for Cork is coming up along the rails as well there. And they have a good solid spine to defence in Hugh Lawler and Padraig Walsh. Tommy Walsh is in there. Paddy Deegan is in there with a lot of experience. They seem to have issues at midfield. And we spoke about Limerick counteracting Jamie Bannon and the influence that he might bring to the game. It'll be hugely important for Kilkenny to counteract what Dara Fitzgibbon will bring to the game, because they, in my view, are two of a kind, and I see Fitzgibbon as being the pulse and the heartbeat of that Cork team, and like his form never seems to dip, Jack. He's totally consistent, and if he can impose himself and get enough of ball into the forward line, then I think Cork are in with a real chance. But if you ask me to separate them, because of tradition and because of I'm reluctantly going, I'm giving a cautious vote to Kilkenny, but I wouldn't be at all surprised were Cork to pull it off.
Yeah, it's definitely a cautious vote. And Shane Dowling in his piece with RTE today, he's tipping Limerick by a couple of points, but he can separate Cork and Kilkenny. And he even said didn't like him to be on defence. Now, for you to be on defence is standard enough every week. But just a few more comments. The Shelminator wants Kilkenny in the final so that we could blast them for 74 the last time we did back-to-back chances, and she's not forgetting 2019. Now, there's a lot of hurling to get through. Like Limerick will have to win Saturday, Kilkenny will have to win Sunday. And there's a few more. And I think Sean O'Tiernig sums up really well here. He says it'll turn into battle, the Kilkenny-Cork game, and that's what Kilkenny will want. And he said Fergal Horgan will leave the game flow, which he does every week. And Fergal Horgan, I think, is unmatched in terms of referees. And Kilkenny for this one. And I'll put it to you like this, Matt, and notwithstanding Waterford's performance in the second half last year, because that was exceptional. But if Kilkenny, is it simple as saying if Kilkenny perform like they did against Limerick in 2019, that they'll win? But if they perform like they did against Waterford in last year's semi-final, that they'll lose?
Yes, that sums it up, Jack.
Yeah,
that sums it up. And I think if they perform like they did last year against Waterford, that Cork are even in a better position to punish them more.
Yeah, But I think in the same token that it might sound contradictory. I think Cork's peak is higher than Kilkenny's, but I think Kilkenny have the ability to smother a team like they did to Limerick in 2019. But you mentioned all those Cork forwards. If 2 or 3 hit form, and to be fair to Jack Connor, he has been the leading light this year. But if you can get Patrick Horgan and Seamus Harnedy and Shane Kingston even at an 8.5 out of 10, along with Jack O'Connor, like it'd be so hard to stop them Cork forwards. And Cork will get.
But you know, on the other side, then like you have Adrian Mullen, you've Owen Cody, you've Walter Walsh, you know, you've Martin Keown,
TJ,
and of course you have TJ. You have TJ, you know, and like, you know, you can give away frees, but of course you can't give them away to Cork either. Patrick Horgan will slot him over all day, thank you. And but TJ Reid, his battle with Robert Downey is going to be massive. It's going to be massive in determining the game and in determining Cork's fate. But Robert Downey's confidence has to be sky high at the moment. He, after 2 fine performances against Clare and Dublin, and you know, confidence certainly, Jack, won't be an issue for Robert Downey.
No, and it was interesting to watch last week's games. I mentioned Conor Prunty. I thought Conor Prunty was the man of the match probably against Tipperary, and I think Robert Downey was the same. And just to give the fullbacks their credit where credit's due, and that's a huge battle. And likewise, on the other side, whoever picks up Patrick Horgan, Jack O'Connor, and it'd probably be Shane Kingston inside there, the trio of Tommy Walsh, the new Tommy Walsh, Hugh Lawler, and Paddy Deegan, like teak tough defenders. Like, the more we talk about it here, Matt, the more I can see why the bookies aren't really giving odds. It's all evens, really, can't you?
I can. And not being able to, the more we talk about it, we're nearly getting confused nearly at this stage, Jack. But I'm going reluctantly and very, very reluctantly for Kilkenny. But if we're Cork to win it, I wouldn't be one bit surprised. Yeah,
I'd side a cautious vote to Kilkenny. Just even the Brian Cody factor alone, he just knows how to win All-Ireland semi-finals. It's very rare that you will catch Kilkenny on a semi-final. Now, it's very rare you'll catch them any day of the week. But I think with Brian Cody, TJ Reid is probably at the twilight of his, well, he is at the twilight of his career. The likes of Tommy Walsh and them that started with so many All-Irelands that want to get back there. But it's same for Cork. Their famine now is at 16 years at this stage since they last won All-Ireland. The 4 teams this weekend are all playing for something. Like, it's incredible. And just before we go, Matt, like the decision to play the 2 semi-finals in one weekend that started in 2018, and I suppose I was like, you're losing a weekend of hurling essentially. But we got it the first year, the Cork and Limerick extra time. It was the best game I've ever seen. You had Clare and Galway played out a draw. Then the following year, you had Limerick, Kilkenny, and Wexford and Tip. Like, you can't get a better weekend really in hurling, can you?
No. It's a weekend that's dedicated to showcasing hurling and showcasing hurling at its best. And certainly the counties that have been involved in the weekends for the last couple of years, they certainly haven't let the side down. They've been absolutely excellent.
Yeah, and as Billy Smith said, let's hope for a great game on both days. Hopefully, from a Limerick point of view, we'll come out on top on Saturday evening. That game throws in at 5:00. It's live on RTE, and then 3:30 on Sunday to see which will come out between Cork and Kilkenny. It'll be a real game of chess both days. We'll leave it there, Matt. We've nearly the hour done. We just for Tree Talk itself, we'll be back probably Monday or Tuesday just to preview any of the weekend's action. Obviously, the Limerick game. Look back in the Camogie. The junior side are into the knockout stages. They don't know are they in a semi or quarter final yet. And we have the Munster minor football final to look forward to. A first minor football final in 23 years to look forward to for Limerick. Obviously, we didn't have Ciaran today. That wasn't clickbait. Just things came up with Ciaran. He couldn't join us. But I'm sure he'll be back to talk about, hopefully, an All-Ireland final with Limerick in it. But regardless, Matt, once again, many thanks to you, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much.
Especially in the game, you get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well, Johnny Buckley to do that down to Tomas O'Shea. He deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the war court today. No more about it. They made all the run, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there